All right, so it is now 10 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started with our Nocturnal Animals field trip. So this field trip will be taking place at Oxbow Nature Study Area, which I will discuss a little bit later on. So some important features of Zoom to know about before we get started are the chat button. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat icon. You can use this chat to answer to general questions posed by the speaker. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask us, we ask that you direct it to the Q&A, and those will be addressed at the end of our presentation. So you might be wondering, where exactly is Oxbow? So Oxbow is a little nature study area that is located pretty close to downtown Reno. It's about 2.2 miles away, if I am correct. It is a little nature study area that is found at the end of Dickerson Road. So if you drive down 2nd Street westward, it eventually turns into Dickerson Road, and you just keep driving all the way straight, and it will terminate at Oxbow Nature Study Area. Some rules to definitely be aware of before you come visit is that we do not allow pets, as it is dedicated to the wildlife, or bikes, because it can scare off some of the animals we have in the area. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jess, who is going to take over. Oh, Jess, you are muted.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Nocturnal Animals field trip here at Oxbow Nature Study Area. My name is Jessica, and I am a wildlife educator with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. So we are here today to talk about nocturnal animals. So what exactly does that mean? So a nocturnal animal is just an animal that is active at night and sleeps during the day. And about half of animals actually tend to be nocturnal. And why exactly would an animal want to be nocturnal? Well, it turns out there are a lot of benefits to being a nocturnal animal. One of them is something called resource competition. And so resources are just things like food and water that animals might be competing for. So to explain this, I'm going to talk about two different animals, hawks and owls. So both of them are going to be raptors that are eating mostly meat. So they're both eating things like voles and mice. And so they're basically competing for the exact same sources of food. But since hawks tend to be more active during the day, which is called diurnal, and owls tend to be more active at night, which is nocturnal, they don't have to directly compete with one another. So they are able to eat the same sources of food by filling a different niche and not directly competing with one another. Another benefit to being nocturnal is that here in the desert, it's especially important because during the summer, it can get really hot outside. You know, in different parts of Nevada, it can get well over 100 degrees in the middle of the day. And so by being a nocturnal animal, you can come out at night where it's a lot cooler and you don't have to expend as much energy to be able to be out, and you don't have to waste precious water that is very difficult to find in the desert. Another big bonus to being nocturnal animal is you can avoid humans. We come with all kinds of different dangers to animals between our cars and our pets. We are smelly, we're scary, and we can bring different kinds of dangers to wildlife. So by being a nocturnal animal, you can also maybe not interact with humans as much. So that's another bonus to being a nocturnal animal. But to be able to come out at night, you need to have special characteristics. And these characteristics we are going to be talking about today are different animals and their adaptations. So these adaptations can either be a body part on the animals, so that is part of their body that helps them to survive, or a behavior. So being nocturnal is a behavioral adaptation. So something that they do that helps them to survive in their habitat and to be able to be nocturnal. So we're going to be taking a look at many different animals that can be found here in Oxbow that are nocturnal. And while we know we have lots of nocturnal animals here in the park, we don't always get to see them. For some of the reasons that we just discussed is that we're not always here at night, so we don't get to see them when they're out and about, or they might be avoiding humans. So they heard us coming and they're going to be hiding from us. So one of the things that we're looking for when we come to the park is evidence of wildlife. Evidence of wildlife is just ways that we know an animal was here, even though we don't necessarily get to see them. So some examples of evidence of wildlife are things like tracks. So we might see their tracks in the mud. We might see their scat left behind. Sometimes we see patches of fur or feathers left behind, the bird nests. There are all kinds of evidence of wildlife that we find here in the park that let us know that these animals are here, even though we don't always get to see them. And based on that evidence of wildlife, then we can go to those areas where we find a lot of that evidence and set up trail cameras. And then we can catch these animals on our cameras and get some videos of them sometimes too. So throughout this program, and Amanda is going to be sharing some of these trail camera photos of many of the animals that we have here at the park. So let's get into them. So I am going to start with the raccoon. So this one here is a raccoon. So raccoons can be easily identified by this striped tail that they have. So they have those different stripes on their tails, and they also have that black mask. So Amanda can put up a picture of what our raccoons look like, and you can see that black mask a little bit better. So the purpose of that black mask is actually a nocturnal adaptation that raccoons have. So the purpose of that mask is to help reduce glare. So if you've ever seen football players, when they put that black underneath their eyes, they stole that idea from raccoons. So that black helps to reduce glare while they are out hunting at night. And raccoons are omnivores. So an omnivore is an animal that eats both plants and meat. And so they will eat really just about anything. So here is some close-up of the teeth of the raccoon. So you can kind of see that they are flattish in the back and then pretty sharp in the front. So that allows them to eat both plant and meat material. And raccoons will really eat just about anything. So they definitely tend to hunt near water. So they're eating things like crawdads or mussels that they might find in the water, but they'll also eat fruit and vegetables, plant material, and just about anything. And that means that sometimes they even get into human sources of food. So we can find raccoons all throughout the city because they are super adaptable and can eat lots of different things. So they'll sometimes get into human sources of food, allowing them to even expand their range even more. So raccoons have pretty okay vision, and they have a pretty good sense of smell in order to be able to find their food. But what's really interesting about them is that they are one of few animals that use their sense of touch to be able to find their sources of food. So when Amanda was showing those pictures, you might have seen one where they're holding their hands out. So you can see that they have those 5 fingers that look an awful lot like human hands. And their hands are really super sensitive. And people have often said that it looks like raccoons are washing their food. And that is because when they're eating, they go and they dip their hands in water and then they rub it on the outside of their food. And it's not necessarily that they're actually washing it off. It's that the water helps make their sensitive hands even more sensitive. And then they are using their hands to get a better idea of what they're holding, of what part of it is edible. So they're really using their sense of touch to figure out what they're eating more so than their other senses, which is pretty unique. They're also really excellent climbers. So they can climb up to trees to get into other animals' nests is another source of food for them, but that also helps them to be able to evade predators. And their back feet can turn 180 degrees around. So when they climb up a tree and then come back down, they can actually climb down a tree head first because their feet are able to rotate all the way around and their claws are able to help keep them on that tree and keep them from falling and be able to climb down head first. So raccoons are a pretty amazing animal, and we catch them on our trail cameras a lot here in the park. And in that trail camera photo you saw, you might see that the raccoon was kind of onto us, maybe saw the flash in that picture because it's looking directly at the camera. Our next animal that we are going to get into is the beaver. So if you've been to Oxbow or you got to watch our aquatic mammals field trip, you probably learned a lot about the beaver, and they play a huge role in the landscape of our park. So at the beginning of the park, there is a big pond that our beavers create, and they create a lot of habitat for a lot of different animals out there. But they do tend to come out at night, and so that they can avoid humans. But they have lots of amazing adaptations that help them to survive. So we'll start with their double layered fur. So if you can see, there's kind of some prickly hairs sticking up here on top. Those are called their guard hairs. And then if you push it back underneath, we've got some really fluffy stuff down here. And that's kind of like their down fur. So they have this 2 different layers of fur to keep them extra warm and extra dry. So that fluffy fur underneath helps keep them really warm in very cold water temperatures. So we have these all throughout the Truckee River. All of that water is snow melt from up in the mountains. So that is really cold water that they need to be able to stay warm in. And then these guard hairs on top lay down flat, and beavers can actually produce oil that they will then rub on their fur, and that helps make them waterproof. So anytime they're in the water, the combination of that oil and the way these guard hairs lay makes the water basically just roll right off of them. So whenever they're swimming, their skin never even gets wet. So that allows them to live in the water and in very cold temperatures. Beavers are strict herbivores. So we can see their teeth are super, super flat in the back. So usually they won't have any of those ridges like we saw in the raccoon teeth. And then they have these big, funny orange teeth on the front. And the orange on the outside is actually iron, there to keep their teeth really super strong, because beavers are chewing down wood. And so you need really strong teeth to be able to chew down wood like this. And you can sort of see some of the teeth marks on this log. So we can see where their teeth marks from these big front teeth are. So that orange, that iron helps keep it really, really strong so that they can take down these logs. But the purpose of taking down the logs is they're only eating the outside of the tree. So they're stripping off the bark because that's the part of the tree that's still growing, that has all of the nutrients in it. So that's the part that they're actually eating. But then they'll take down the rest of the tree to build their dam and their lodge. So the purpose of the dam is to just block water off so that they can create a big pond for themselves. And then the lodge is where they actually live. So there are 2 different structures. And the lodge is very interesting because it has an underwater entrance. So that helps them to be able to escape predators as well, is that they can get underwater to get into their lodge. And so that means that there's not very many predators that are willing to follow them into the water to be able to get to them. Beavers also have these pretty impressive claws for digging in the mud to help them create that dam and the lodge. But really, their super sense is going to be their nose. They have a really excellent sense of smell to be able to smell for predators, and they can even smell plants and smell what part of the plant is going to be the most tasty and the most nutritious for them. Another way they're able to live in the water is by having specialized ears. So if you've ever been swimming and you got water in your ears, it's a very annoying feeling. And if you were a beaver, you wouldn't want to have to deal with that all the time. So they have pretty small ears that are cupped, but they actually can fold down flat against their head so that they don't get that water in their ears. Because again, they wouldn't want to have to deal with that all of the time. And of course, we know that they have that big flat tail that we can see here that they are able to use as a rudder. So that helps them to be able to swim, helps them turn directions, and it also stores fat for them as well. So beavers really have lots of different amazing adaptations to help them to survive here in our park. Our next critter we're going to look at is the striped skunk. So we have 2 different species of skunks in Nevada. So there are striped skunks, which I have here, and there's also spotted skunks. And they do get their name by the patterns that they have. So we've got these 2 big white stripes on our striped skunk. But our spotted skunks are a lot smaller, and they live in more desert habitats versus the riparian habitat that we have here at Oxbow. Skunks are also going to be omnivores, so they're eating very similar things to the raccoons. So they'll be eating carrion, which is dead animals, or a lot of insects as well. And they have a really good sense of smell. So we've got our skunk here, and you can see they have relatively small eyes, small ears, but really the big part is that they've got this really big nose. So that's mostly how they're finding their food, is with their really good sense of smell. And the best adaptation skunks have is, of course, that spray to keep them really safe. And there are not many animals that are willing to mess with that spray, because that skunk spray is basically like their own personal pepper spray. So not only does it smell really bad, but it also burns. So it's going to burn and smell really bad. And that's going to mean that they are trying to shut down the senses of whatever predator is after them. So it means that they are going to shut down their eyesight, so they won't be able to see very well, and they won't be able to smell very well. And that gives the skunk the opportunity to be able to get away. But skunks really don't want to use that spray. So people are often worried about getting sprayed by skunks. But if you are paying attention, if you are in an area with skunks, you'll probably smell them first, even if they haven't just sprayed. They just have a very musky, noticeable odor. But again, they don't want to waste that spray because that is there to keep them safe, because without it, they don't have a whole lot of defenses against predators. So before they spray, they will actually give animals a warning. So if you were to see a skunk and it starts doing this funny stomping motion, it's trying to warn you that you are getting too close and you need to back up. And if you don't listen, then you might get sprayed by the skunk. But again, they really don't want to. So they're giving you that warning so that you can get away first. Like I said, there are not a whole lot of predators that are willing to mess with a skunk because that does shut down their eyesight. They can't see very well, and they won't be able to smell. But one main predator of skunks is going to be the great horned owl, which I have here. The reason that great horned owls are able to be such good predators of skunks is because they have something called a nictating membrane. And a nictating membrane is a third eyelid that comes over their eyes and is clear. So it's this clear cover that goes over their eyes so that when the skunk sprays, it doesn't hurt their eyes at all. It doesn't harm their eyesight whatsoever. So that is one defense against the skunk spray. And the great horned owl, like many other birds, doesn't have a sense of smell. So that is another reason that they aren't really harmed by the skunk spray. So these are one of the main predators that we'll find of skunks. And it wasn't until pretty recently that we realized that we had great horned owls here in the park. So Amanda is going to put up some pictures of a great horned owl and some other kinds of owls that we have. So we knew that we had barn owls occasionally because we caught one on the trail camera a little while ago. But very recently, just a couple of weeks ago, we actually found a great horned owl in the park as well, which was super exciting because we didn't know that they were here before that. But great horned owls are excellent predators because one reason is they have really good eyesight. So you can see on my owl here, they have pretty big eyes compared to the size of their face. So that is what they are mostly using, is they've got those really big eyes. Their eyesight is about 8 times better than a human's. So it's really, really good. And they have really interesting eyes. So this is a great horned owl's skull. And you can see that they have these bones around the outside of their eyes. So those are helping to keep their eyes really safe. But by having those bones, that means that they're not able to move their eyes. So a human can stand still and I can look over here and look over here by just moving my eyeballs back and forth. Owls can't do that. They are encased in this bone and their eyes aren't even round. They are actually more tube shaped to fit inside of this. But again, that's going to keep them really safe and give them even better eyesight to be able to key in on their prey. Owls are very strict carnivores, so they are eating only sources of meat. So they have this hooked beak to be able to tear that meat. So you're going to find this in all kinds of raptors, including hawks, eagles, and owls are all going to have that hooked beak. And these really strong feet. So you can see those big old talons that they have on their feet as well. So their feet is how they are capturing their prey. So they're going to have 3 of those talons in the front and 1 in the back so that when they come down, they can grasp their prey like that using their really super strong feet. And they are able to be really successful hunters by, one, having really good camouflage, is that they can kind of blend in with trees pretty well. So you can see the cottonwoods behind us. They blend in with these trees pretty well. So they've got that excellent camouflage, but they're also pretty silent flyers. So they are able to sneak up on their prey really well. And they're able to do this because they have special feathers at the edge of their wings that as they're flying helps to break up the air as they fly. So Amanda can put up the picture and you can see some of those barbs on the edges of their wings. So that helps to break up the sound. So it helps them to be really super quiet while they're flying. And they have lots of this down. So these super fluffy feathers down on their feet and on their underbelly helps to absorb some of that sound as well. So they can really sneak up on their prey. If you've ever heard other animals, a good example is a goose. If you've ever heard a goose fly over the top of you, they are super, super loud because they don't have those kinds of adaptations to help absorb that sound. So that really helps owls to be extra stealthy to sneak up on their prey. Our next critter is going to be the coyote. So coyotes are a very adaptable animal. We have them all across the state of Nevada, and they live in a huge variety of different habitats. So they can live in the driest desert of southern Nevada to riparian habitats like here at Oxbow, to even in cities. We have them in downtown Reno. So they are super adaptable and able to live in lots of different types of habitats. Kind of like the raccoon, they're able to do that by eating a lot of different sources of food. So they're not super picky. So these are their teeth. And while they are omnivores and will eat different sources of food, they definitely prefer meat. So they're mostly eating things like rabbits and mice and voles and stuff like that, but will absolutely take advantage of human sources of food and also eat plant material as well. So coyotes are very social animals. So they do tend to live in family groups with a alpha male and female. So there is the alphas there, and then they all live in the family groups with the young as well. But despite being super social animals, they don't typically hunt in groups. So although they form packs like wolves, they do not hunt in packs like wolves. So wolves evolved taking down really big prey where they all work together to take down like a whole elk or something like that. And coyotes evolved eating much smaller things like rabbits and voles. So although they do form those family groups, you will mostly see them if they're out and about, often just on their own, because that's how they hunt, is they're typically on their own. It's been pretty recent that we started getting a lot of coyote sign in the park. So we started seeing scat all over our trails. We would see their tracks in the mud. And so we've been setting up lots of trail cameras trying to get our coyotes. And we have been lucky and caught a couple of pictures that Amanda can show you. She's also going to play a video of our coyote running down the trail. And I want you especially to pay attention to the eyes. Because coyotes have something special in their eyes that many nocturnal animals have as well, and it's called a tapetum. And you have probably seen this without even realizing what it was. So if you have a dog or a cat, or you have been driving down the road at night and like the headlights of the car flash on a deer and you see that really bright light in their eyes, that is you're basically getting to see the tapetum. And it is like a mirror on the inside of an animal's eye that reflects the light back onto their retina. So as that coyote is running down the trail in the video Amanda's going to show you, you can see that flash, and that is the tapetum. So you're seeing that reflection of the light. Lots of different nocturnal animals have this, but humans do not. So we wouldn't be able to have this. Our next critter I gotta kind of unbury here is going to be our bear. So some people might be surprised to know that we get bears here in the park, and it is a little bit surprising and very exciting. So we have black bears that come into the park, but typically we only get them in the fall. So in the fall, bears are going through what's called hyperphagia, meaning that they are getting ready to go into hibernation. And during this hyperphagia phase, their whole purpose in life is to just eat as much as they possibly can and get as fat as they possibly can so that they can go into hibernation. And here in the park, we have many different berry bushes. We've got blackberry bushes throughout the park. In the back, we also have some apple trees and plum trees. So during the fall, the bears will follow the Truckee River down from the mountains, and we catch them on the trail cams in the park all the time. Amanda will show you some photos of our bears here in the park that we have caught on the trail cams. So despite their name of black bear, most of the bears that are in Nevada are actually going to be this brown phase, but they are still the black bear species. And some of their awesome adaptations, one of which are these really impressive claws. And these claws, although they look scary, are really not necessarily for defense. So these are not weapons. These are really meant to be tools. So they are tools for digging up, digging into like decaying logs to get the insects out of them, digging into the dirt to get to roots and things like that. So they are really using those to dig up their sources of food and to climb trees, because black bears are actually quite skittish. And if they feel threatened by humans at all, they will actually probably climb a tree to be able to get away from us. So those big claws are for finding their food, digging out hibernation dens, and climbing trees. So like I mentioned, some of their food is going to be a lot of fruit. So they eat a lot of berries, they eat a lot of insects. They'll also eat a lot of carrion, which is again, dead animals that they've come across. But bears are mostly omnivores. So about 85% of their diet is going to be plant-based. So here is our black bear skull, and you can see that the teeth in the back are super, super flat, and they actually look a lot like human teeth. So they are pretty similar with, they've got those flat teeth in the back for munching up the plant material, but of course they do have those canines if they were to eat meat as well. And you'll notice that the biggest part on their skull is definitely going to be this nose. So bears have an absolutely incredible sense of smell. So that is really their superpower. That is what is driving them most of the time, is going to be that sense of smell. So they are going to be following their nose to the ripe fruit, to the fish, whatever it might be. They are really going to be following their nose. And their sense of smell is about 2,000 times better than a human's. And it's estimated that they can smell food from up to 10 miles away, which is really incredible. So that's really what they are using to be able to find their sources of food. Their eyesight is pretty okay, so it's pretty mediocre, and they have okay hearing as well. But they do have cupped ears, which is another adaptation you'll often see in many different nocturnal animals. And this is something that you can actually try out. So if you want to follow along with me, you can take your hands and make a little cup shape out of them and put them around the edge of your ears. And as I talk, you'll hear that it's a little bit louder and it's a little bit clearer. And so it allows you to even be able to hear better. So lots of nocturnal animals are going to have those cupped ears so that they can hear better. And they're really maneuverable. So they can kind of turn their ears one way or the other to be able to hear around them even better. Our very last animal that we are going to talk about today that we find here in the park is bats. So we have bats that we see at night that especially come out by the pond. So all of the bats that are found here in Nevada are microbats. So they are the smaller of the two groups of bats, and they're all insectivores in Nevada. So they are eating only insects. So we really like bats because they eat thousands of insects every single night. Pesky insects like spiders or mosquitoes. Bats are really helping to keep down those insect numbers. And bats are the only mammals that are capable of true flight. So while there are other animals, yes, like a flying squirrel, they are not actually capable of true flight. They have to climb high up in a tree and they can jump out of the tree and glide down, but they can't necessarily flap their wings and get up any higher in the air. But bats actually can. And they do that by having some pretty impressive bone structure. So you can kind of see the different bones here. And these are the exact same bones that humans have in our hand. So they are actually using their hand to be able to fly. So if you imagine that in between all of your fingers, that there was skin in between them, just like here, that is how bats are able to fly, is by basically just using their hand with the skin covering it in between. And this little tiny thing right here, that is actually their thumb sticking out the top. So we're not exactly sure what kind of bats we have here in the park, because when bats are flying, they are very difficult to be able to identify. But they come out by the pond almost every night during the summer to swoop down and get a drink of water and to help us maintain some of those insects. And they have one of the most impressive adaptations of all nocturnal animals, and that is echolocation. So they have, again, very mediocre eyesight. So there is that saying that bats are blind, but they're not actually blind. They can absolutely see. They are just using their hearing to be able to get around and to be able to find their food rather than their eyesight. So if she hasn't already shown it already, Amanda will put up some pictures of some bats and kind of how echolocation works. So they are sending out little squeaks into the night, and those sound waves are going to go out into the night and bounce off of anything else that's in the area, whether it's a tree or an insect. And then they are listening for those echoes coming back from those sound waves, and then using these big old ears to be able to hear for those echoes and locate their prey. So they are able to, by using this, they're able to find out where the insect is, what direction it's moving, and even kind of what it's made of. So if it's fuzzy like a moth or something smaller like a mosquito. So this is a really impressive adaptation that not many animals have. So as you can see, we have lots of different kinds of animals here in the park, and this was just a few. There was even more we could have gone over, but we didn't want to overwhelm you with too many different kinds of animals. So how is it that you can see nocturnal animals? Well, nocturnal animals are everywhere. You just have to be patient, and you got to be looking for them. You know, they live even right in our own backyards. They live in our city parks. You just have to go and wait, look, and listen for them. And keep an eye out for that evidence of wildlife. So whenever you're in a park, keep an eye out for those tracks or the scat, and then you can come back there if it's safe at night and try to see some of those nocturnal animals. But they are all around us. So with that, Amanda, are there any questions that we haven't gotten to so far?
As of right now, it doesn't look like we have any questions. However, we'll give it a minute and see if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask. You can definitely put them in the Q&A or even the chat, and I will get to them.
Yes, thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I'm just going to say it now before I forget. If you do have a moment, there is a survey that pops up at the end of this program. So if you have a minute to go and fill out the survey and let us know what you thought, we would appreciate hearing your thoughts. But yeah, other than that, if there's any questions on any of the nocturnal animals I talked about here or any other animals that you are curious about that might be in Nevada.
Still no questions, but we've got some thank yous.
Great.
Wait, someone asked, do beavers mainly eat trees?
Yes, excellent question. So yes, they are eating mostly the bark on the outside of the trees. So they're stripping off that bark, and that's the part that they're eating, but they'll also eat like new growing twigs and leaves as well. But it's entirely plant material is what they are going to be eating. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. You can also catch them eating like cattails and things like that.
Yes, definitely.
Got some more thank yous.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. When you registered for this, you were given my email address. So if you think of anything later, you can absolutely email me. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And we hope to see you at another one of our future virtual field trips.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm going to tune it out now. Bye-bye.